plants are all the rage these days, very fashionable. And it's not surprising, plants like gunnera, bamboo and phormium can give instant form and structure to any garden. But there's a catch. These plants can be gigantic, sometimes look aggressive, and are usually fast growing, and many gardeners are nervous of using them.
Call them architectural if you must, but I prefer to call them thugs.
Please, 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 please.
I've got a lot of time for thug plants, because basically they've just been misunderstood. Because they're large and aggressive looking, people always assume they're going to be trouble. They've already made their minds up about the personality.
Baby, you did me wrong.
I have the same thing. Because I have a few tattoos, people automatically assume that maybe I'm a bit of a wido. Now, I have this tattoo of a mushroom on my arm, and it's there for a special reason. This is a fungus called Amanita muscari, and it lives on the roots of the birch tree. At the end of the Ice Age, the birch and the mushroom were so successful in combination, they actually followed the thaw. So the tree and the mushroom moved through the continent, following the thaw, just because of this unique partnership.
I love you so.
And out of respect and awe, I had this tattoo done.
Baby, take my hand.
So it just goes to show, doesn't it? You should never judge a book by its cover. Because if you do, you really might be missing out on something.
Girl, I love you so. Please, please.
The thing about thugs is I've got to know how to handle them. The job I'm doing here is dealing with a garden where thugs like laurel and rhododendron ponticum have got completely beyond their station. Meet Mandy. Apart from her sunglasses, she's got three things in her life: Marnie, Jessica and Sean.
This is a man's world. This is a man's world.
Sean has lots of things in his life. Mandy, the kids, Arsenal FC, mosaic tiling, close-up magic, and a yen to play the guitar.
This is a man.
Sean loves his lawn, but with so many things on his mind, he tends to leave the rest of the garden to Mandy, which is why she's called me in.
But it wouldn't be nothing without a woman or a girl.
Some people have fairies at the bottom of the garden. Mandy's got thugs.
I know it looks brutal, but sometimes, when it comes to thugs, you've got to show 'em who's boss.
Over the years, Mandy's timid trimming has only encouraged the thugs to become dominant and intimidating.
Absolutely not.
My job is to transform this forgotten, overgrown corner of Pinner into a dramatic space.
The plants like, obviously the screen.
We're both fans of architectural plants, so we're off to a good start.
We obviously want to keep this sort of green background, don't you?
Yeah, privacy's nice.
You like the privacy, do you? Well, I think I like the idea of the screening as well, so but we could make it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
So what we could do is maybe just put a lot more tropically big, thuggish looking plants right through it, just to give it a bit more interest, a bit more texture.
Yeah, fab.
Is that all right with you?
Sounds
Yeah?
good, yeah.
So I've got my work cut out then, haven't I?
Yeah. Get lopping.
I've cut the laurel right back to let in the light, and I'm cutting out rhododendron completely. Now, in my book, rhododendron ponticum has got an attitude problem. It won't let anything grow around it, and there's a theory that chemicals in its roots knock out the competition. But whatever the methods, one's too many, and this one is for the chop. It might seem strange, even foolhardy, to replace one thug with another, but that's exactly what I'm going to do for Mandy. You see, thugs aren't all bad. In fact, they can be very good news for at least one of three reasons. One, they'll establish themselves in areas other plants find too extreme. Two, they'll add an instant presence. Three, they'll sort out any troublesome gaps. These plants have big personalities. Martin Gibbons is Mr. Big. The two loves of his life are his big car and his big plants.
Wild thing, think you move me.
And his nursery specialises in the enormous, obviously.
We've obviously got a bit of a thing for big plants, Martin. Eh? So what's wrong with like the odd patio rose or petunia? It's not.
Well, I think it's the thing that appeals to me about big plants, particularly palms and the bamboos, is a sort of surreal idea of going to an English garden, seeing a palm tree in the middle of the lawn or surrounded by huge bamboos. It's just really, it's the fact that you have to do a double take, and of course the bigger the plant, the more appeal that has. And people who say, oh, you know, it's going to grow too big or it's going to grow too tall, I hate that, you know, because it's absolutely the opposite of what I'm about. I want it to grow enormous and huge, and if you end up with a jungle in your garden, you know, that's kind of what you wanted, isn't it? Yeah.
Martin's been obsessed with palm trees for most of his life, and his passion for the gigantic means that his nursery is packed with thugs from all over the world. Eucalypts from Australia, yuccas from South America, and bamboo from China. If it's big, it's here.
This is one of my favourite thugs. This is Formium Tenax. It's a very beautiful looking plant, very architectural, and you can see why designers like it. But actually, I consider it a bit of a thug. It's very tough. If you get hold of the foliage and you look at it, it's very strong and hardy, and you need a good old knife to get through it. And it forms these big thickets. It's almost bodybuilder-like in its appearance. And it reminds me of a geezer I knew in Scotland who was a hard man, and you wouldn't want to have been on the wrong side of him. If you treated him right and gave him some respect, geezer was the salt of the earth. And it's the same with thug plants. If you know how to manipulate them and you know how to use them, they can end up being your best friends.
There was no way I was leaving before I'd seen Martin's prehistoric palm. It's a thug too far for Mandy's garden, but it's a magnificent beast. And Martin's so fond of it that he brought it back all the way from Argentina.
That is breathtaking. I mean, there's a story behind this.
Well, yeah,
one.
this is it's called the Latin name is Trithrinax campestris, because the leaves are said to look like three what do they call them? Tridents.
I see.
Supposed to look like three tridents, so it's called Trithrinax.
Well, from a distance, you see that looked to me quite downy and soft, but that is absolutely lethal, isn't it?
I mean, somebody said all these spines are like countless downward-pointing pairs of scissors, and you can see it does look like that.
That must have been around. That must be an old plant. That must have been, you know, I mean, someone had right trouble eating on that, wouldn't they? That's what predators would that have?
Well, there are no modern predators of this, so my pet theory is that they developed these spines as armament against dinosaurs. And there was actually a dinosaur that lived in that area. It's called Saltosaurus. And I think that even a dinosaur would have pretty difficult
Hard time
job.
getting through that, yeah.
But if you really want a balance on the brink of horticultural sanity and scare yourself with the baddest of the plant bad, there's only one place to come. And I should know, I used to work here.
On my way back home. On my way back home.
The first thing that struck me when I first came to Kew was the sheer scale of it. I mean, this place is flabbergasted. It just shows you what can happen when you've got the room and the skill to grow plants on a scale like this. I mean, it really doesn't get any bigger or better than these gardens.
Thanks to generations of British plant hunters, Kew is packed with the world's wildest plants. It's a freak show, a compelling and beguiling chamber of horrors. I feel there's a knife edge being negotiated here. The gardeners have these plants under control, but only just. This is real Day of the Triffids stuff.
Have a look at this plant. Now, this is amazing. I've been trying to get up close to this for some time. And now I am. I'll tell you, it's an incredible experience, because this is some plant. This is Victoria amazonica. And this will grow up to an inch a day, and this leaf's probably only 4 months old, so it gives you an idea of the power in this plant. Also puts out a pretty nifty flower as well as a bonus. But this form of thuggery this uses is to get out and smother, cover the ground, get out my way, you're not getting any light, this is my area. And I think the scale I'm standing next to it, you can see it does a pretty remarkable job of it. Not only that, it also has these mad spikes here. There's quite a lot of fish in here, but they're not eating this, and I don't blame them, because that is rather tasty spikage. We've also got this incredible venation here. Really, the power in it is flabbergasting. The rate it grows is just incredible.
Nature is the law, baby. Nature is the law now, baby.
Back on dry land, there's more horticultural skullduggery afoot. This is the strangling fig, a tree-killing tree. I've seen these in Africa, where they envelop huge trees, choke them to death, and then feed on their rotting remains. Nice. The strangler fig is the psychotic cousin of the rather more respectable weeping fig. You can guarantee that if there's a horticultural black sheep around, you will have one.
I mean, this plant is, look at this, I mean, it doesn't look right, does it? First time I ever really came across bamboo was tying dahlias to it, small thin sticks. Well, this is a giant bamboo and it's a little bit of a different prospect. I mean, look at this is mental. And this comes out of the ground with these giant spikes. And it can grow up to 1 metre a day in some countries. What it's basically doing is it's expressing its thuggery by just sheer speed and getting up into that light. It also sends out underground stems and exploits other areas. It's quite an aggressive plant all in all.
Luckily, this giant bamboo can only grow under glass in this country. But there are temperate varieties which grow outside at Kew. Keeping them in check, bamboo bouncer and Kew student Carl Pooley.
I'm a real wild one, wild one, wild one, wild.
Like many prison wardens, Carl is really quite fond of his charges.
They're graceful,
Yeah?
especially when they're blowing in the wind, and they're beautiful when you see the frost and the snow on them.
So there's an elegance about them then, you find, yeah?
Yeah, but you've also got to take a firm hand with them, otherwise they'll be all over the place.
Yes. So they're
The queue will be covered with them.
Blimey, this has changed a bit since I was last here, mate.
Yeah, there's been quite a few large changes. As you can see, there's been a Japanese traditional farmhouse.
That's breathtaking, isn't it? That is.
This is bamboo heaven. Untold kinds of temperate varieties are all growing here. Now, bamboo has a roguish reputation as an invasive nightmare, which is only partly true. There are plenty of clump-forming types that will stay where they're put, but the invasive ones really can run and run. But at Kew, Carl makes sure they can't run far.
The rhizomes form a dense mat and they tend to go out in all directions. Some of them can go 10 metres in one
Yeah.
year. You can plant a young clump and it'll just tend to sit there quite deceptively. And then it'll start shooting in all directions. I've heard it said that in the first year of planting it'll sleep, in the second year it'll creep, and then in the third year it'll leap. But this plastic membrane we install, it's about 600 millimetres deep. All the rhizomes of most bamboos tend to be pretty surface rooted.
Sure. So this is like the electric fence of the bamboo
yeah.
world then, is it? And that works a treat, yeah?
Yeah, well, they can go through concrete even, but we tend to use this because it's shiny and the rhizome will hit the side
Yeah.
and then tend to bounce to the left and stay contained.
Back at Mandy's garden, the backbone planting is underway. Lots of striking thugs to go in. Bamboo will feature, as will eucalyptus. But the most exciting thing is that I'm using my own high-tech version of Carl's polypropylene membrane.
What are you doing?
I just thought I'd wantonly destroy this pot now. We've got a bamboo back here called Sasa. It's a bit of a bruiser, a bit of a land hog. So by knocking the top off of this, I can then basically sink this in the ground and it'll stop these rhizome roots, as they're called, actually escaping and running up into the rest of the border. And it saves you a lot of weeding.
Fab.
And I know you're happy about that, aren't
I'm happy about that.
Now, I've put the pot at that size, Mandy, because most bamboos won't penetrate more than 600 mil down into the ground.
Right.
So I don't want them going out. I don't want them doing an Alcatraz and going out underground, you see.
Break out.
Right, I've got a little job for you as well now, right? If you hold that spade.
Okay.
Sorry about the mud, happens in gardening. Okay, so I've got it here, so if I lift it and you just tap the edge of the pot. Perfect, look at that. And you can see what I mean here by rhizomes. You see these really big, thick roots, look at that. And that's what's out and about, that does. That'll be in your kitchen. And he goes to the hole like that.
Right.
And that's all just a matter if you want to
Fill it back in.
just do a little more, few shovelfuls in for me, and then I'll finish you off.
So how come I'm doing all this?
Well, you know, I like to get my clients involved. You know, a bit of sexual equality. female prime ministers and female diggers and all that.
You go and make the tea then.
I think that's time for me to take the spade back and be a gentleman, isn't it? Because you ain't tasted my tea. I love this plant. This is a plant called Gunnera manicata. They form these huge leaves and big crowns underneath, and you can step inside them. It's like being a kid again, almost.
You're such a beautiful freak. I wish there were more just like you.
You feel dwarfed by it. All the scale feels thrown out.
Beautiful freak. That is why I love you.
And the light will hit the leaves and cascade through, and it's almost cathedral-like in its appearance. Also amazes me is they look so hard and thuggish and almost prehistoric if you want, but they're actually quite sensitive souls because in the winter they don't want to hang around for our cold, so the leaves will die down, form a blanket like a duvet over the root ball, almost cocoons itself, and it'll sit there and protect its roots through the winter, waiting for the spring again. And once the spring hits in, once again it'll throw up these huge, really powerful leaves. You can see the power in that, it's really going to go for it. And once again, it'll form this fantastic cathedral-like appearance. Sean, we're going to put this gunner in the ground, so just get that out of the way. If you can knock us out a hole exactly where it was.
Right, just here?
Yep, lovely.
But the most remarkable thing about this plant is that it's enticed Sean from his sofa.
You into your gardening, are you?
Not really, Chris, no.
No? So, what's the extent of your experience?
I mow the lawn, that's what I do, that's my
Yeah.
job.
So this isn't a new one digging.
Yeah.
You're going to be feeling this tomorrow, then.
Oh,
We need this about a spade's depth, mate, so...
bit deeper than that.
Yeah, lovely, mate. And now, the thing is with these plants, right, is they've got to have wet feet. They don't like it dry, yeah? They've got to have some moisture around their roots, otherwise they'll start toiling. So what we've done is we've put a liner in round here to make sure, and we've pierced a few holes in the bottom, so when it rains, the soil will retain the moisture and keep the roots happy and hence keep the plant happy.
What if it dries out?
If it dries out, you're going to have to water, I'm afraid. You're going to have to do a bit of gardening. Plants never cease to fascinate me, and they do this in many ways. I've got some brilliant examples of this here. This is called juvenility, and in layman's terms, that basically means, like all young things, they're actually pumping with hormones. And this is a pulwonia, and the way it expresses this is by producing these huge plate-like leaves. The eucalyptus, on the other hand, modifies its leaves, and you get this sort of button, grey, downy type foliage. Now, we've got two benefits here, because both of these plants are thugs in nature. This will get up 40 feet very quickly. The eucalyptus, which most people fail to recognise, turns into an almighty tree if it's allowed to. So what we can do is we can stall them. And basically this means we'll cut them down at ground level and get them to send up new shoots, many multi-stemmed. So we get a double bonus with these plants. Not only do we stop them growing into huge, great trees, we maintain their youthful appearance and their juvenility.
Apart from the eucalyptus and the pulwonia, I'm using phormiums and cordlines as backbone plants. Being around so many roguish plants reminds me why I'm so enthusiastic about them. It's almost a spiritual sensation.
First time I really came across big plants was when I flew into Douala in Cameroon, going out there to do some forest work. Came out of the airport and we were driving on the road and I saw a plant called Ficus benjamina. And we all know this because it's that plant, the weeping fig, that sits next to the radiator in a foyer in someone's office with loads of dead curly leaves around the bottom. Well, this plant was a street tree, grown up maybe 40 feet and cut into lollipops. Quite an amazing sight. But this was nothing compared to what would happen later when I first went into lowland forest. And here you get trees that are good 50, 60 metre with these huge sweeping buttresses that they balance on that sometimes can be up to, say, 30 metres. And really the feeling you get is one of complete humility. And Joseph Conrad, for me, really summed it up when he described it in a few lines by saying it's like going back through time to the beginning, when vegetation rioted and the trees were kings.
So far, I've brought you thuggy success stories, but there's a much more sinister tale to be told. Some thugs are just too much for any garden, too much for this country even, and they're out there, and they're thriving.
You do it every hour. Oh, baby, you're so so vicious.
The one I've come to see is actually illegal, and I'm not even allowed to tell you where I am.
Welcome to the world of the giant hogweed, the thug of thugs, the Chelsea headhunter of the countryside. The reason I've got gloves on is if you snap the plant, it produces this sap, and this sap, if it gets on your skin, is going to give you blisters. It'll actually attack your DNA.
And as if that's not bad enough, giant hogweed doesn't have any predators in this country, and with nothing to check its progress, it romps away on a grand scale.
And this plant hasn't so much germinated, it's erupted from the ground, and it's put on a whole metre before it's put out its first leaf. And then it's done the whole thing again and put on another metre before it put on its second. And then we have this huge internodal gap, and this really tells me how powerful this plant is, how much strength there is in it. It's really determined to go for it and get up to the light. Then it puts out these huge leaves because it wants to soak up as much energy as it can possibly manage. Because its overall aim is to get up there and produce these big mop-head flowers. And these produce seed en masse. It really is spawning itself. So one head like that might produce 200 seeds. So that means 200 more of these giant specimens.
It's not just brutes like giant hogweed. The British countryside is host to all sorts of aggressive aliens. Cathy Rosen and the good folk of the British Trust for Conservation Volunteers are rescuing the banks of the River Thames from Himalayan balsam. A rampaging busy Lizzie, would you believe?
Do you enjoy doing this? Do you enjoy ripping stuff out? Is it,
Yeah, I
you
do
get
enjoy it.
satisfaction from it?
Yeah, try it. It's fun.
Is it? Okay, go on.
Oh, you need to get
top it.
You need to get the roots there.
So I need to get it from the base.
Yeah, there you go.
So it comes up quite easy, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, it's very easy to get rid of.
But it's quite a good-looking plant, isn't it? So what have you got against it, really?
Well, it's just because it's not a native species. It doesn't have sort of any natural predators, and it will just take over this area and become a monoculture. Right?
Go and look.
It's the old no predators problem again. It means that balsam simply smothers the opposition. And when Cathy's not there to pull it up, the results are staggering.
Quite an impressive sight, really, isn't it?
I know. It's completely Himalayan balsam. That's all that's here.
And this all grows in one season, doesn't it? Because it's an annual.
Yeah.
So that means that this was probably bare through the winter, and all this growth has been put on in this amount of time.
And it's because the way that it spreads itself, it has these exploding seeds.
Popping seeds, I've seen this like that. It's a lot of booby traps, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I see what you mean now about it all being nothing but balsam. It's like eco-geddon here, isn't it? They've just gone mad right through it.
It has. There's nothing. No British wildlife is here at all. So it's just like under here is sort of scorched earth.
Along the river, there's yet another escaped foreigner with no predators running riot.
Japanese knotweed's quite an attractive plant when you look at it, with these long red stems and red petioles, but don't be fooled by its appearance. It's another plant that operates a scorched earth policy. There's nothing growing underneath. And unlike balsam and hogweed, it doesn't seed. It grows by underground stems, and basically it makes it a nightmare to get rid of. Trust me, you really don't want this in your garden.
It's all about balance. If you want a garden that works, look at nature. This is perfect. This is what Cathy and her friends are trying to achieve. I won't bore you with the dynamics of the ecosystem here at Hamlands, but all the native species coexist happily together. There is no one plant that's in control, and hence there's lots of varieties, from allium to vetch. But it's odd, in the midst of all this perfection, I can't help feeling slightly guilty.
Oh no, what's this? Spider web and I'm caught in the middle.
I can't help having a bit of a soft spot for thugs, really. We've given them a right hard time. They've been a victim of our discrimination.
The thought of all the stupid things I've done.
We brought them over from foreign lands, planted them, with pride of place in our gardens, showed them off to our neighbours. But then gradually realised we couldn't tame them. And they were outflanking the smaller plants, the more decorative plants in our gardens.
What if I ever caused you trouble? Oh no, I never meant to do you harm.
So then we put them down the bottom of the garden, out of the way, in the more rugged area. And being survivors, they obviously leapt the fence and got out into the countryside. And now we're chasing around, chopping them down, nuking them with chemicals. And all in all, we've treated them with horticultural fascism, when maybe, just maybe, we should have shown them a bit more respect.
Back at Mandy's, most of the plants are in the ground, but my encounter with the outlawed giant hogweed has left me strangely touched, so I'm going to include a tribute plant.
I really like the look of giant hogweed, and let's face it, it's a pretty stunning plant, but I don't particularly want to go to prison over it. So I want to choose a plant that mimics it, and I really like this plant. This is Angelica gigas, and it looks pretty similar, and it also throws up these big umbel flower heads, as it belongs to the same family. Like giant hogweed, it's also a profuse cedar. But if you don't want it getting all over the place in your garden, simple technique is just to deadhead it as the flower goes over. This will also have the added benefit of the fact that it'll flower again, so it repeats itself. And all in all, I think this is pretty much a top plant.
Of course, the other great benefit of Angelica gigas is it doesn't have caustic sap. And instead of Japanese knotweed, I'm planting polygonums and persicaria. All the beauty, but with none of the world domination complex.
So we've got all your structure in now, Gal, all the plants, that your beefy ones, yeah, your hard ones. What do you reckon?
It's looking nice.
So what we've got to do now then is infill, yeah, with some nice herbaceous stuff, sort of keep the other stuff on its toes. So got a little selection here. Anything that catches your eye?
I'm using herbaceous plants to complete Mandy's garden. They have to be thugs to cope with the tough stuff I've already put in, and one of the toughest has to be the prehistoric horsetail. It likes it damp, but it has a tendency to run riot, so we're containing it in the gunner's lining.
You know, like when the train goes along in the countryside, you see that big dash of pink?
Yep.
Well, this is the same plant, rosemary willow herb, but in white, and you get these really nice long plumes of white flower. It's going over now.
But unlike its common cousin, which seeds profusely, this one spreads through root action, so it's easier to contain.
How tall do you think that'll get in the long run? Take a wild stab in the dark.
5 foot.
5 foot. Well, it'll get actually bigger than that. It'll get up to 8 foot. And it'll have, its leaves get real sort of big and go like a blue colour. It's very beautiful, and you get these sort of coral poppy is the name, is probably you will remember it by. So, and it's because it's got quite an exotic look to it, it fits in with our sort of exotic garden, yeah? So, another place to choose?
Ooh, how about in the corner?
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
Cute. You got me doing it again.
I have, eh? I have a bad back tonight, you won't see.
Mandy's got many more thugs at the end of her garden than she had before I arrived, but now there's a balance. Thugs are tough plants, but even thugs need some tender loving care, every now and again.
Good little point probably is the Paulwonia here, this one. This is your biggest water indicator, because what will happen if it's too dry, that'll flag. That'll just go...
And then it's time to get the hose.
It's time to get the hose out. It's a good indicator. Final thing is just herbaceous plants like the Angelica, which I know is your favourite, and the rosemary willows, this polygonum maybe will go, all of this sort of stuff.
Yep.
All of these, just when they die back in the autumn, you'll see them all brown up. Don't go cutting them down straight away, because one, it's part of the plant character. You know, you get 4 seasons out of it, it has 4 colours, but also it'll protect the root ball. So it's protecting it from frosts and stuff. And then get to late winter, get your secateurs out, or your shears, bit of interaction.
The Formians and the Coralines will take care of themselves, and the gunner and the horsetails will thrive in their homemade bog.
It's your garden now, isn't it, you see? It's all in there, looking great.
It's fabulous.
And it is fabulous. Even in the confines of a suburban English garden that now exists the spirit of the jungle. Where once there was a horticultural black hole filled with laurel and rhododendron, I've created a thuggy paradise. This is a special moment for me. It's not often that I get to work with all these plants at the same time. But when I do, the only word to describe how I feel is joy.